We've all been told the same thing about productivity, right? Just work harder, put in more hours, you gotta grind it out. But what if that's actually the worst advice you could possibly follow? Today, we're gonna dive into the science that proves the real secret to getting more done isn't about brute force, it's about working with your brain, not against it.
You know that feeling? Your calendar was just slammed. You fired off 100 emails. You were busy from the second you started. But when you finally shut your laptop, you look at your to do list and just think, wow, I made zero real progress. If that sounds familiar, trust me, you are not alone. Well, this feeling actually has a name, the productivity trap. It's this mistaken belief we all have that just being active is the same as being productive. But the science, it tells a totally different story. The very things you might be doing to get ahead, like pushing through when you're exhausted or skipping breaks, are probably the exact things holding you back.
So let's start by busting our first big myth. For anyone with a crazy schedule, the idea of taking a break, well, it can feel like a luxury you just can't afford. The myth is that breaks are wasted time, but in reality, they might just be the most productive moments of your entire day.
And this isn't just a nice idea. The science totally backs it up. A study from the National Institutes of Health found that wakeful rest, those short, quiet pauses you take between chunks of work, is just as crucial as the practice itself. So what on earth is actually happening inside your brain during that downtime?
It all comes down to this amazing process called neural replay. The second you stop and take a break, your brain actually gets to work. It starts rapidly replaying the patterns of the task you were just doing, basically practicing it over and over in the background. This is what helps lock in what you've learned and makes that new skill really stick. And get this is the wild part. The NIH researchers found that during these little breaks, your brain is replaying that new skill up to 20 times faster than when you were actually actively practicing it. Just think about how efficient that is. You are literally learning faster by doing nothing. That's not just productive, that's a straight-up productivity superpower.
All right, let's move on to our next myth, one you've probably heard a million times. Eat the frog. The idea that you have to tackle your biggest, scariest task first thing. And look, sometimes that can work, but a lot of the time it just leads to procrastination because the task feels way too big. Turns out there's a smarter, more scientific way to build up momentum. So instead of starting big, the science shows us we should be starting small. Your brain is literally wired to run on success. Every single time you complete a task, no matter how tiny, you kickstart what scientists call a success cascade. One small win makes the next one feel easier, and it creates this awesome snowball effect of achievement that can carry you through the whole day. The chemistry behind this is just fascinating. When you check something off your list, your brain releases dopamine. That's the feel-good chemical. And this creates this really powerful feedback loop. Your brain basically goes, hey, that felt great. Let's do that again. That little hit of dopamine sharpens your focus and ramps up your motivation for whatever you've got to do next. So here's how you can build this cascade for yourself. It's really just 4 simple steps. First, you start with a quick win, something that takes, 5 or 10 minutes. Answering one important email, organizing your desk, whatever. That simple action triggers the dopamine release. Then you immediately feel a little more capable, a little more motivated, and boom, you use that surge of energy to roll right into a bigger, more complicated task.
This brings us to our third and final idea, and it challenges a really deep-seated myth that work, just by its nature, has to be a joyless grind. We kind of think that if it's not hard and unpleasant, we're not being productive. But what if we could actually hack our own motivation and make even the most boring tasks feel, well, engaging?
The solution is something called gamification. And all this is taking the elements that make games so addictive, things like points, leaderboards, rewards, and applying them to your everyday work tasks. It's a seriously powerful way to tap into your brain's natural desire for achievement and progress.
The reason this works so well is that it hijacks the exact same reward compulsion loop that makes video games so addictive. You do something, you get a reward, even something as simple as earning points, which triggers that feel-good dopamine release. And that makes you want to do the action again to get another reward. It's the engine that powers both video games and super productive workflows. And in practice, this can be surprisingly simple. Things like leaderboards or badging systems can create a sense of progress and even a little friendly competition. It just makes your achievements visible, which is incredibly motivating and taps right into our basic human drives for status and recognition.
So, we've covered the science, right? The power of breaks, the momentum from small wins, and the psychology of turning work into a game. Now, let's bring it all together and turn this theory into a practical plan. We're moving from the why to the how.
This really brings us to the single most important shift in mindset. For decades, we've been obsessed with time management. But true, sustainable productivity isn't about managing the clock. It's about managing your energy and your attention. It's about working with your brain's natural rhythms instead of constantly fighting against them. So here are 3 concrete ways to do that. First up, time blocking. Don't just block out work. Actually schedule in those crucial breaks and deliberately put a small win right at the start of your day to kickstart that momentum. Second, daily planning. Actually dragging your to-do list onto your calendar forces you to be realistic, and it turns that source of anxiety into a real, actionable plan. And finally, set aside just 30 minutes a week for system improvements. Find one thing you do all the time and just make it a little bit better. That small, consistent investment pays off with huge time savings down the road. At the end of the day, working smarter isn't about some magic app or a secret hack. It's about making small, intentional shifts based on the science of how your own brain actually works. So the final question is for you. How will you redesign your day to start working with your brain, not against it?